Nick's like, wait, is Chris talking about the election or the doc? I mean, you shouldn't be confused. We're talking about both of them. We're talking about both things.
Welcome to Recotopia, a happy home for recommended movies, TV shows, music, video games, foodstuffs, and more from two people you can definitely trust. Trustability varies by region, no guarantees implied. And now, here are your hosts, Chris Atkinson and Aaron Dicer.
There'll always be the argument that video games are meant to be played for fun. Believe me, some of it's a lot of fun. Video games are meant to be played at home, relaxing, on a couch, amongst friends, and they are. And that's fun. But competitive gaming, when you want to attach your name to a world record, when you want your name written into history, you have to pay the price.
Hello, everybody. It is Recotopia, episode 139. My name is Chris Atkinson, and I'm joined by Aaron Dicer.
Heidely Hode, Arcade Arenos.
That's right. That's right. Today's big recommend is The King of Kong, A Fistful of Quarters, the documentary from 2007. I would like to welcome Chat to out here to watch us talk about movies on a Tuesday, not an ordinary Tuesday, election day in the United States Tuesday. Did you guys know about that? Did you know that was going on?
Have you heard about this thing called the election?
It's kind of insane. Anyway, so yeah, thank you for joining us today. And Aaron, do you have any small recommends?
It's no big deal.
Itty bitty living space.
It's so small and light. It's small, it's tiny, it's petite, it's wee.
Why, of course I do. It's part of the job. I have a couple of movies I've been watching as I head into what I call every year the movie apocalypse, because I generally have about 100 movies that I try to watch over the course of November and the first week of December before my ballot is due for Critics' Choice. And I see some good ones. And one of the good ones I saw is a movie called I'm Still Here. Now, this is not the I'm Still Here that you may remember from a few years ago with Joaquin Phoenix. This is a movie about political unrest and the toll it can take on a family. It is, I'm trying to remember I think it's Brazil. Yeah, it's Brazil. This is happening in Brazil in the 70s and 80s. And this family is torn apart by political division where they are seen as political rivals. I don't want to spoil too much of the story, although it is based on a true story, so you can find all this out historically, what happened with this family. But it really centers around the mom of the family and the perseverance that she shows in going through all of this. So I'm Still Here is definitely recommend from me. I really, really think... we mentioned Election Day, we mentioned the time we are in our world or whatever. It's important to continue to look to the past for how political divisiveness creates trauma in our world and where it can go to. And to never think that we're above it. Never think that the country you live or the culture you live in is not susceptible to that in some way because power breeds it. And so, this is very recent past in Brazil where this was happening. So worth a watch. I'm Still Here.
I can't wait to see this in February when I'm trying to catch up with everything later, because your movie apocalypse is now. Mine is in February before we do the best of the year podcast and everything. And God, those weeks of watching movies, you'll sit there on a day watching 5 movies sometimes. And if you ever wonder why, a lot of times it's like, hey, Chris, what did you think about this movie? I'm like, nah, I never saw it. And then someone says, oh, I heard you talking about it. That's the reason why, is because you watched something in the middle of like 5 different movies. And you got to remember the titles, which, these titles, I'm Still Here. When you put this on the email, I was like, what, the Joaquin Phoenix thing? That didn't come out this year, did it? It was like 2010, right? And then I was like, oh, it's another I'm Still Here. Okay, all right. But yeah, I'm you're what you're going through now, I will go through in 3 months.
Yep, absolutely.
I have seen a couple of movies in theaters that I enjoyed. The one I saw over the weekend was We Live in Time, the Florence Pugh, Andrew Garfield movie. Now, the story here is nothing new. And we've seen a lot of movies where there's couples and one of the spouses or one of the significant others gets cancer, and the whole thing is about what they're going to do about that diagnosis from there. This movie tells its story kind of like time travel, but it's not time travel. It's just telling it out of order all the way through. We see them together at the beginning. We see them before they're together. We see them as they're dating, and it just keeps going back and forth and back and forth. We know about this diagnosis pretty early on, so it's really just sort of like just telling their story, like as if someone is remembering, oh yeah, here's the story we want to tell you about this part of their lives, and like, let's flash forward now to this and all that. So the story itself, we've seen before. We've seen this kind of the structure, but I will recommend this movie based on two of my favorite actors going today. Florence Pugh and Andrew Garfield are so great in this movie that you're going to forget that you've seen this kind of story before. The way they act and play off of each other and everything. These two are such a delight to watch. It's almost like someone went through my own personal mental casting Rolodex to find a couple for a movie, and this is that for me, Andrew Garfield and Florence Pugh. Um, so yeah, this is a recommend. I would, and I think it fits the very definition of a small recommend. It's one of those type of movies where I'm not saying go rush out and see it now, but when you get a chance, when you get a chance, get a shot.
I'm excited to see this week. It's on my list to see this week. And it's one of those things where you had me at Garfield and Pugh. Like, I'm just put them in a movie and I'll be there to see what they provide, because I think they're both super, super talented. So
Yeah.
now I'm even more excited to see it.
Yep.
My second small recommend is a documentary on Netflix. So you can see this now. It is called Daughters. And Daughters is a documentary about a program that's been going on in the prison system that provides for inmates to be able to see their daughters in a one-on-one daddy-daughter dance type situation. I think they call it Date with Dad kind of thing. This is a heartstring tugger. This is one of those movies that you're going to watch, and if you have any sense of humanity in you, you're going to feel real empathy for these human beings who the movie isn't focused on their decisions that led them to prison. It's not focused on why they're at prison. It's focused on, can they still be fathers while they are in prison, and the impact that their incarceration has had on these girls. And it is powerful, meaningful. I cried several times. My wife and I watched this together. We both were very, very moved by it. It is called Daughters, and I think it's worth your watch on Netflix.
What an image, too, that you have shown us on here. I know that people listening can't see this, but that's quite the image of this girl holding on to a fence and looking straight up and sort of like upside down to us. So, yeah, definitely will want to watch this when I get a shot. All right. The next one I have is something that I know that both Aaron and I have watched, and it's Conclave, that also came out this year, starring Ray Fiennes as a cardinal who is sort of the office manager of the Conclave. As the cardinals vote for who's going to be the next pope. The pope that was there has died, and he has left some confusing things in his wake. And as the cardinals come to vote, everybody is voting on who they think should be the next pope based on various things. There's Stanley Tucci, who believes that the pope should be very liberal and very welcoming of everyone. And then you have John Lithgow, who's sort of like the in-between guy. And then you have another guy who's like the extreme right wing version of the Pope. And then you have a mysterious newcomer who comes in that nobody has been able to really vet, but the Pope that has died has given a sort of a like an okay to him, but nobody really knows who he is. And as they vote, there is they need to have a certain amount of votes. I can't remember the amount. It's like 72 or something like that. They need something like that to get to elect the new Pope. And of course, like for the first few votes, it's always someone has a lot of the votes, but not enough. And then it goes down and down and down. And after the vote, there's a sort of a campaigning type of thing going on. This is kind of like a mystery movie, though. Like it's one of those where Ralph Fiennes keeps digging into what this person's about and what they've done and whatever. And as he goes along, he keeps he's getting votes too for this whole thing. So a lot of this type of thing is like he's telling certain people they can't be Pope, and he's also saying, I don't want to be Pope, I don't want the votes. And this movie makes this whole thing where it seems like maybe his not wanting the Pope is how he's going to get votes out of all of this. Does he have some some intentions here and everything? So like it's a very interesting movie, like how they go about this, where like we don't know what everybody's true intentions are. We do know that what they will do if they are Pope. And so there's a lot of like politicking going back and forth as to like who should we first off, who should we vote for? And then like, is there anything in their past that we're not sure about, that we don't know about? And that's what Ralph Fiennes does all the way through this movie. And I guess it's one of those that I don't really tell you too much more about it, because you want to kind of figure out all these things for yourself. And I don't even want to go as far as, I don't want to go any further. So, because to even tell you anything else about it is like, oh, now you know to look for something. So like, it's one of those type of things.
Yeah.
That was my experience with this. Is a really, really good movie. Isabella Rossellini shows up in this as well. So it's a really, really good movie.
Yeah, this is Edvard Berger, who did All Quiet on the Western Front last year.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Directing this. I think that was his first, so I think this is his second movie.
Mm-hmm.
And boy, does he have a talent for putting the audience in like this tension atmosphere, right? And it's interesting because you're really just dealing with a voting situation, and yet it feels almost at times like a horror movie, like he's scoring it like there's this ominous undertone to it, and I think that all adds to a really beautiful tension. I described it as 12 Angry Popes at one point, because it's got that feel too of, how are they going to figure this out together? How are they all going to come together? Who's going to convince who of what? It also has some really incredible, beautiful homily type stuff. There's one that Ralph Fiennes gives about certainty that just was like, preach, brother, preach. And then there's another one that the new character, Cardinal Benitez, gives about peace and about things at the end. It's just so good. So, yeah, this is my jam. This kind of movie is just absolutely 100% my jam. I love everything about it. I loved getting through it. I love some of the big moments. There's a big vote that's cast by the Lawrence character, the Ralph Fiennes character, at one point, with a bigger impact than anybody would have thought, kind of thing, that just is done so perfectly. Like, it's edited so perfectly, and it has such an impact. And I love the end of this movie. I love everything about this movie. I think it's great. So it'll be one of my favorites of the year, I'm sure.
Absolutely. All right, let's go on to our big recommend, and it's Aaron's to take away. So take it away, Aaron.
I'm fine. It's just that you're so big.
It's so huge.
It's a good rule, but this is bigger than rules.
It's bigger on the inside.
Is it? I noticed.
All right, King of Kong, A Fistful of Quarters. By the way, Fistful, spelled with one L, not two, just so you know.
You won't hear about that in the outtakes at all.
Is a 2007 documentary directed by Seth Gordon that follows the world of competitive retro gaming The movie begins with a man named Billy Mitchell, labeled as Donkey Kong Champion, talking about the difference between fun and the cost of competitive gaming. Before Steve Wiebe, labeled as Donkey Kong Challenger, says that the Donkey Kong machine is his safe place, thus setting up our main players before a William Burroughs quote relegates our entire world to war and games. We then quickly meet many other retro game experts, including Walter Day, who we'll come to know as the referee and founder of this particular subset of competitive gaming, and Steve Sanders, who has apparently written a book about all this stuff and is good friends with Billy Mitchell now. They, with other voices, set up that retro competitive gaming really came down to the 5 classic games, and it all started with a 1982 Life magazine photo shoot where Billy Mitchell challenged Liar Liar Mario's Pants on Fire, Steve Sanders, to a Donkey Kong match and hammered him over the head by beating his bogus score by almost triple. And this set the new Donkey Kong world record at 874,300 points. It was then that the legend began, and we hear from others that Billy Mitchell is that guy, the perfect man to be the face of gaming, from his patriotic ties to his hot sauce collection. Then on Independence Day, 1999, Billy Mitchell did not go quietly into the night. No, he did not give up without a fight. He lived on to accomplish a perfect game of Pac-Man. That's right. And everything seems to be coming up Bill House. We then cut to Redmond, Washington, where Steve Wiebe is looking for a way to pass the time, and some light Googling one day gives him the idea to take down Billy Mitchell's Donkey Kong score. Wiebe grew up as a bit of an OCD athletic musician who could never just quite become a champion at anything he did. But the competitiveness lingers on, and now he has a new outlet. Now we pause for some lessons on the plot and story of Donkey Kong, as well as some instructions on the different boards in the game. We're getting a good look at the game here, including the difficulty of the elevator boards, we're told. Next, we see Wiebe's family explaining how he's excelled as a drummer and how that might help him in the game, including his wife expressing her joy at how good he is with his hands. We cut back to Walter Day saying no one will ever beat Billy's record, before immediately cutting to Steve's first world record attempt. He's at 600K without losing a man, and then his son pulls a kid's and needs some attention. And Wiebe can't believe the crap he has to put up with, but it all goes in the tape he sends to Twin Galaxies for verification. Cut to a conversation with Walter Day, who you may remember is the referee there, and many others about the importance of having rules, before we see Wiebe's tape get reviewed, where he indeed broke Billy's record with a score just north of 1,000,000 points. And Steve is suddenly a local celebrity and is now a science teacher. We also find out that Steve Wiebe took Billy Mitchell's Donkey Kong Jr. record as well, and it was Billy's last world record. And since Billy Mitchell thinks he's Michael Jordan, he took that personally. So Twin Galaxies sends a couple of inspectors to check out Steve's machine to make sure everything's okay. And despite being told to wait for Steve to get back, they manage to get in and start taking apart the machine when he's not there. And then they spot it. A package from Roy Schilt, a man who said his Missile Command score was wrongfully disregarded and hates Billy Mitchell. This clearly means that Steve was cheating, according to the whole Twin Galaxies crew, including Billy Mitchell, who is somehow one of the people in charge of determining if the score that beat him was legit. And even if the board was legit, Steve Sanders says it must be disregarded because Roy Schultz rubbed his taint on it or something. But Billy Mitchell then says we should all give him a break because he's like abortion, I guess. Steve was forlorn, but after Roy talked him out of chumpetizing himself, he decides to go give it a shot at a live score at FunSpot, because we've been told time and time again the live scores are where it's at. FunSpot is known for its amazing players and its lack of DDGs. If you know, you know. So Steve Wiebe is going to pull a Bill O'Reilly because he's doing it live. Steve shows up at FunSpot, and we meet Brian Koo, who is both keeping Billy Mitchell up to date and also hovering over Steve's shoulder to, check on him. We then see Billy Mitchell hand a VHS tape to a woman he's apparently Qbert sponsoring. Wiebe's got a great game going because, according to Brian, the randomness went the opposite way it usually goes. It's my favorite line in the whole movie. So then we learn about a possible kill screen that might be on its way, and Brian ups his intimidation tactics and lets people know that you can come and see the kill screen. But Weeby still kills it, and Walter Day congratulates him by saying it was the highest score done in public. Interesting wording, but cool. He's got the record, and now they know he's legit. The old score will probably count too, right? Right? Huh. Anyways, it's time to watch Billy's tape that he sent, so they throw a big shindig, and Billy Mitchell scores 1 million on his tape, which will, of course, be verified by having someone going to check his machine, right? No? Steve can't even watch it? Nobody can watch the tape? Okay, verified in 10 minutes because you said so on the phone? Okay, I see how we're doing here. Anyhow, Weeby is now rightfully feeling ganged up on, so some sad piano music and Weeby tears let us know that this meant a lot to him. Cut to 9 months later, and Steve says he's let it go. Walter Day is playing his guitar in the cold, talking about how he's supposed to be an artist and is contemplating letting go of the Twin Galaxies thing. Meanwhile, Guinness calls to say that they trust these crooks over at Twin Galaxies, so now I'm never drinking their beer again. Weeby finds out that the deadline for Guinness submission is 420, and somehow that's not a joke, so the Rocky theme kicks in, and he gets to training. He cuts ties with Roy Schilt and calls Billy to lay down the challenge. See, there's a live competition that's in Billy's hometown, so certainly Billy will be there, right? Day one begins with Sanders passing on Weeby's scores to Billy this time. He's scoring good scores, but not getting close to 1 million. Sanders clarifies the pronunciation of Weeby, not Weeb, for his last name, and everyone is impressed by his persistence. There's a clandestine gathering at Billy's restaurant that Steve crashes, so Billy refuses to show up, and then it happens. Later in day 3, I believe, Billy walks in while Steve is playing. Will the fireworks fly? Will they be cordial to each other? Or will Billy just walk by and respond to Steve's, "Hey, Billy," with, "There are some people I don't want to spend too much time with." Yeah, it's going to be that last thing. The documentary then makes Billy eat his earlier words about live performances by having his significant other admit she's actually never seen him compete head-to-head in her entire life. 3 days in, the fatigue is starting to set in for Weeby, and it all looks to be lost heading into day 4 as he continues to try to break this record, and it comes down to his last start on the final day. He gets to 364,000, we see. He loses a life. 666,000 now, another life down. 714,000, and he loses his final life. It will not happen. The good guy can't always win, but he can be recognized as one of the greats by Walter Day and Steve Sanders, who he has finally won over with his heart. They will now accept his tapes and send an apology for how they treated him, even if they don't know how to pronounce his last name. And that is... Wait, there's more? We're now back in the garage, and that yellow line is climbing, and it's 2006 and 1,049,000 for the new world record. And now it belongs to Steve Weeby. And that is King of Kong, a fistful of quarters. And nothing else has happened in this story since. Chris.
Absolutely nothing.
What did you think going through this movie again?
This has always been a fascinating documentary to me. And of course, it's even more fascinating now that you see all the things that have happened since then. You know, and think about this too. I don't think this takes away from Steve Weeby's accomplishment or anything like that. But just think about all this time he has spent trying to get some recognition for this record. And since then, it has been broken something like, let's say 30 times since then. Right now, like since Steve Weeby broke it, a person named Hank Shin came in and was like the record holder for a few years. Then a person named Robbie Lakeman came in, and he or she was the record holder. Wes Copeland was in there for a bit, and then another person named John McCurdy, and finally Robbie Lakeman again, who's been on this scene for several years now, currently has the record holder, it's currently the record holder unless it's been broken and Wikipedia hasn't updated it yet, but it's currently at 1.2 million or so. And it just goes to show that classic games, there's always people who are going to be going after, like, trying to get the most optimal way of winning or beating a record or anything like that. I follow this a lot through the speed running stuff, and through like Carl Jobst, who does a lot of these speed running things. Of course, he's being sued by Billy Mitchell because of all the different Billy Mitchell videos he's come out with over the years. But yeah, last week when you announced this and you were like, well, I don't know if this has anything to do with election day or not, but it really does. This Billy Mitchell personality type is a very familiar one in our lives these days. All the things that are in here, you can probably point to something that Donald Trump has done in elections and things like that, checking the machines, making, casting doubt on things when, whatever, all these different things. And probably one of the biggest ones. This is the one where you want to punch Billy Mitchell in the face the most, is at the very end when his buddy Steve is sitting there going, yeah, man, is it Steve Sanders that's his buddy?
Steve Sanders, yeah.
He's like, yeah, Steve Wiebe, man. Yeah, he's totally legit with me. He's obviously a great Donkey Kong player. And then the interviewer's like, what do you think, Billy? He just turns and says, I'm not familiar enough with the situation to say.
So much pride.
Oh my God, man. And again, you don't know how much documentary is being manipulated in that moment, but the documentary implies that there's this dead silence between he and Steve after that statement. Like Steve's like, oh no, I just offended my God King here. I may have to make up for that later. I really stepped all over it on this one. And what it's amazing how this guy's legend has translated to this kind of following over the years. Like it feels like nobody can see what an oily, I don't know, like lying son of a bitch this dude is or whatever. So like, it's just amazing to me. And listen to this guy talk all the way through, and just the pettiness that he goes through the entire time, and just goes to show the the importance of having independent people search on verify anything in this kind of in this kind of world. Like you mentioned, and like the movie mentions, Billy's a referee on whether or not his record gets to get broken. And and I love how the documentary did this thing too, where it's like the guy's like, oh, this will take probably a week to figure out if Billy really did have the record or whatever. And then it says 10 minutes later. And Walter Day's on the phone in some like area of the game place, just kind of going like, okay, so yeah, there was some static on that video. Like we were trying to figure out, oh, it's a copy. Oh, okay, cool. Well, I think this is perfectly okay and everything. And like that, just the maddening effect that has the whole time. They're like, you got to do this live. And because Billy, who's so, so respected in this world, sends in a tape, why would he lie? Why would he do something, why would he cheat? There's no reason for him to cheat. There's nothing that is on the line here for him to cheat. And what's sad is there really isn't anything on the line here. Like, he could still be a great Donkey Kong player. And like, you could still say, like, back in the day, this guy was amazing, but he's not good enough for him. He's got to be always the best, can never admit anything wrong. Never. So anyway, Nick's like, wait, is Chris talking about the election or the doc? I mean, you shouldn't be confused. We're talking about both of them. We're talking about both things. So that's sort of where I landed on this. It's a fascinating one, and it makes you want to go and see further on what happened after all of this, after all this is later. And it just really does paint the picture of someone who is like a sort of a naive, and he's innocent and everything, and the amount of stuff this guy is going through to try to get to this record. The thing about any kind of game, whether you're speed running or you're trying to get a high score or anything like that, it requires such study of the game that I don't think I don't think game manufacturers go out and say, I hope somebody like really studies this and like becomes this kind of a player or whatever. Maybe they do. I don't know. But I think these games are meant for you to put in quarters and then you play it as best as you can and then you die and then you put more quarters in. I think that's the whole point. But when you see Steve Wiebe going on here and he's drawing stuff on the glass so that he knows that, well, when this little spring is going through here, it's like, I can't go up the ladder just yet. I have to wait until it goes over this parabola that I've drawn. Then I can go up the ladder then. And it's just a lot of just concentration. I imagine your eyes are watering, your hands are just like cramping up and all that when you're doing a game that just this long and everything. But it just goes to show what you have to do to get into these things. Like, I watch some of these speed runs and I'm like, why? How do you guys have the time to figure this out? Like this particular thing, like how did like you see some speed runs sometimes where you're just like, okay, I see that you did that, but how did you know to do that? How did you get to the point of doing that to get to this point? And I it blows my mind every single time. I watch somebody beat Elden Ring in like, I don't know, 3 minutes or something. And I'm like, how did you learn this? How did you learn to do this? Anyway, that's another thing that goes into it. There's a lot of time being spent. This guy's a family man. He's got 2 kids. And she told him straight up, his wife told him straight up, like, you got to do this at night. You can't do this any
right.
other time because you got to help me out with these 2 young kids and everything. So anyway, this movie is really fun to watch, and it's fun to make fun of Billy Mitchell, and it continues to this day.
I think it's so supremely well edited too. I think they tell the story really, really well. You know, this is one of those documentaries that had the fortune of starting to tell a story that turned out to be really interesting. You know, like they got everything they could have hoped for out of, you know, the footage that they were capturing. You know, you mentioned a lot of the places I wanted to go. I would add to the rant that we've both gone in about accepting Billy's tape. That one of the subtle things I caught this time that I actually didn't catch last time was that Walter at the end of that conversation says, "What was the score again?" And Billy tells him the score and he just types it in. Like there's no verification that that's actually, he just asked him, "What's the high record score I'm going to put in here?" "Okay, thanks, Billy. I'll put in what you just said to me." And it may have been perfectly exactly what was on that tape, which was, you know, again, probably, I think, from what I've seen, was probably played on an emulator, which was the problem, you know, and because you can do all sorts of nefarious things on an emulator, although, you know, that doesn't mean nefarious things were done on the emulator, you know, all those caveats, whatever. But it's just such here's what you can't take away from Steve Wiebe, no matter how many times the record changes, all those kind of things. And I don't have all the details on these other, you know, record-breaking spots. I think there are literally 100 people ahead of him now, or 100 I should say 100 scores ahead of him, or something like that.
Yeah.
Have any of those scores been in an arcade with the enemy crowding people around you and people coming by and hovering over your shoulder? And like, you can't take away from Steve Wiebe that he went to FunSpot to prove a point and scored the highest score anybody had ever seen performed live under the pressure. After everybody on the quote unquote other side said, well, it doesn't mean anything if you don't do it live and do it under pressure, he went, okay, I'll go to FunSpot and I'll score the biggest score you've ever seen live in the history of this game. That's like, nobody can take that away, no matter how many people, you know, get a higher score or whatever. That moment in this movie, I think, is the pinnacle of this story. And it's just like,
well, and as the chat, you know, we keep seeing the joke about Donkey Kong kill screen coming up. If you want to see it, that whole thing is there so that he can get all these people to crowd around at the biggest moment.
Put all the pressure on. Yeah,
exactly. And you know, I do tend to think that if you are in the zone on that game, the number of people crowding around probably doesn't affect it. But the fact is, there are people that is a technique that this guy has used, kind of like calling a timeout when the guy's trying to kick a field goal or something like that,
Right. Yeah.
that type of thing. But like, I think Steve was so in the zone on this thing, he wasn't going to get distracted by anything on this. And yes, you're right. It is an absolute marvel how he just keeps that focus the entire time. And yeah, I'm never going to take that away from him. It's just funny that we sit here, just think about what you're putting yourself through to get to a certain point, and only to see it get broken 100 more times after that, it's probably not that heartbreaking. I mean, he beat the one guy that nobody thought could ever get beat in all of this, but now you've probably got a bunch of people who are like mega nerds on Donkey Kong, who have like studied the game like more than even Steve Wiebe could. And just like, there's more ways you can score points that you didn't realize, and that's the reason why those records fall so quickly. Like, people find all these optimizations that you never thought about before. So,
well, and it's not accidental that all happened after this movie came out, right? Like there's also like, there's the fact that the Donkey Kong scores have gone back and forth, or they have this elevated level of importance in the gaming world because of this movie and because of the story of Billy Mitchell and Steve Wiebe. So it's really interesting to see the impact of this movie. I also this time was looking more for editorial manipulation in the documentary, like really kind of seeing, okay, clearly you're choosing to paint Billy as this character. There are probably things you left out where he was. Well, I shouldn't say probably. There might have been things you left out where might have been things.
My doubts about that.
Right. That it would have been more magnanimous. I don't know. But also I wonder how much the I have to look up the guy's name, but the Missile Command guy, the Captain Awesome or whatever he called himself, which we haven't even talked about the Captain Awesome stuff.
Oh,
which
is
just wild. But I do wonder how much Roy Schilt. I do wonder how much the Roy Schilt stuff was downplayed. Like, was it? Was Steve Wiebe a hand of Roy Schilt to get back at Billy Mitchell? Now, certainly for Roy, that seems pretty clear he was. But for Steve, they're very clear to show the second attempt, like where he calls Roy and is like, hey, maybe don't back me this time. I just need to cut ties with you, kind of thing.
Exactly.
And so I just wonder that first time, like if Roy and Wiebe did have conversations that were like, oh, we are going to take down Billy Mitchell. We are, and that's not to say they did it in any incorrect way, but I do wonder if the movie downplays that a little bit for the villain hero, story to go through.
Knowing what I've seen of documentaries and things like that, I would not put it beyond a documentarian trying to get their movie in theaters to do something like that, to make sure to paint someone completely as a villain and another person as completely as the hero, so they can have that narrative. I mean, they do the other editorial thing that they're doing, not to say that there's no validity to this, but is when they're showing Steve Wiebe doing all that drumming and they're showing all the parabolas showing up and everything. This is a nice arty thing that they do in the movie where he's doing all that and we see all the parabolas and we're supposed to like, oh yeah, he's taking his drumming skills to Donkey Kong. And like, and it's one of those type of things like, yeah, maybe, kind of. I guess
maybe we're stretching it a little bit with doing A Beautiful Mind with Steve Wiebe, but we're gonna do it. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, and this is sort of away from the movie, again, talking about speed running. Just recently, there was a guy another one of these games that just constantly gets the different speed runs attacked is Super Mario 64. And just recently, a guy who owned all the different star records except for the 120 star recently demolished the 120 star record. And like, just talking about the dedication that people get into these type of things, there are people who are really good at certain levels, and like if you do that level a certain way, you can do that faster than anybody. But the reason why people who do 120 star the full game don't do it that way is because the things that they do in those one levels are so hard that like it could ruin the entire thing.
Right.
And it's only going to take a matter of time before there's someone insane enough to be like, I'm going to do all the optimized things on every level. I don't care if it takes me years to do this. There's eventually going to be somebody who beats Super Mario 64 in like 30 minutes or something like that, because they're going to do all the optimized stuff. I don't think 30 minutes is possible, but it's going to be one of those type of things where these records just constantly are on. They're just always on the edge. They're always getting there to be beaten and everything. Anyway.
Yeah, and I think we've talked about the Tetris stuff before too, and just like how there's just been some really fun, insane things with that. There was one more thing about the editing that I wanted to mention. Not the editing, but I'm sorry, it was something else I paid closer attention to this time, which was Billy's steal the thunder plan, where, his plan to send the VHS and just completely steal Steve Weeby's thunder if something happened or whatever.
Right.
It's so clear to me watching it this time that everybody at Twin Galaxies knew what was going on the entire time. Like, they knew what was on that tape. The way that Walter Day carefully words his congratulations to Steve Weeby about, the best live. Because at that time, if you're Steve Weeby, you think it's the best score that's ever been scored ever. Like, there's no qualifications needed.
Yeah.
But Walter Day words it very specifically because he knows what's on that tape. And, and even if there's...
What is it? Is it early? It's early on in his run that guy gets the call and is like, oh, you got a tape, or he's like, you got a tape coming or something like that. Of course, Billy Mitchell tells both the woman, like, you can lose your luggage, but you can't lose this tape. And then he tells Koo that, like, oh, you can lose your life, but you can't lose this tape. Type of thing. Anyway, sorry to interrupt.
No, you're good. But all of that is because Billy Mitchell and his team, like, it shows even more, like, the whole Twin Galaxies thing is like they're in his pocket, right? Because the whole idea is to create this big moment where Billy is still king. And it's not just Billy's whole idea. It's everybody at Twin Galaxies' whole idea.
Yeah.
They're all on board with this. And watching it this time, you can see the little smirks that they have, even the Twin Galaxies people, as they're talking about how well, Steve is doing on his run, how Weeby's doing on his run and everything, because they know in the back of their mind they're about to crush this man. And I just think, how nefarious is that? Like, set aside even the fact that it may have been on an emulator and may have been, not a good score, like a correct score or whatever. Set aside all that. Just to do this to somebody who you've said, hey, you got to come do it live, and I'm going to send a tape to crush, crush you.
Static on it.
And not only am I going to do that, I'm going to play it up in this huge way. So I'm going to wait to see what you do, and then I'm just going to hammer you over the head with, like, it's gross. It's just gross. It's poor sportsmanship. They think it's like a flair for the dynamic or whatever, and it's just,
they love it. They love like again, that his that their hero is doing this type of thing because he's the guy that they've put in their head as the best of the best. And they do that really. You may have mentioned that the underhanded thing with, because he's still on the machine playing the game when they go to watch that tape, and they know he can't leave it. And then they're like, well, it's a one-time thing. Well, only a one-time thing. Can't watch it again, ever again. And just like, I mean, sometimes if you encounter people like this on this earth, is like, if it means that much to you, go ahead. If you want to do this and just be like this about it, and you want to tell yourself you're the best instead of just being the best, have at it, man, because everybody else will go my way on this.
Yeah. I also love that the movie ends on the daughter still wondering why Guinness World Record is so important. Just like asking, like, at the end of a documentary where you've based this entire movie on the importance of this, to have the ability to end with going, actually, is it all that important, from the mouth of children? I thought that was that thing that he says in the car where he's like, some people spend all the time in the world on this thing or whatever, and she goes, some people ruin their lives over this thing. Well, it's strangely also moving, even though it's played for laughs. When the little boy's going, "Stop playing Donkey Kong," like pleading with his dad.
Yeah.
Like I don't even know if he needs his butt wiped. He's just trying to find some reason to get his dad to stop playing this game and pay attention to him. I mean, that's like parental stuff, man. So
Yeah.
that's the movie never really wrestles with that fully, but it's in there. It's a little bit in there. For sure.
The one thing we are not seeing are probably the times when he's decided to just take a break and play the game during the day, even though he's been told he can only do this at night. And I mean, that may be an example right there because that kid is up. He shouldn't be up right now. So, but yeah, no kidding. Good God, he's just spent a lot of time doing like this. It boggles my mind.
Stop playing Donkey Kong, Dad.
Okay. Let's get on to the super secret double feature.
Be very, very quiet. Secret? What secret?
Our dirty little secret.
I tell you something I've never told anyone.
And I thought about this one for a while. I was trying to think of actually some I thought I tried to think of some fictional films for a while. I even thought of like something like The Quick and the Dead, where you have Gene Hackman, who's constantly changing the rules of the duels in the movie to sort of like to keep his superiority in there. He knows he's still a great gunfighter, but like he's probably losing a little bit too by the end of it. And so he keeps adding ways to cheat in Quick and the Dead. And I think Quick and the Dead would have been a really good one to pair with this. I ended up deciding to just go with another documentary because I just can't imagine watching The King of Kong and then Quick and the Dead or vice versa, like in a double feature or whatever. So I went with a 1988 documentary called The Thin Blue Line. That title has a lot of connotations today. It is exactly what it means today. In fact, it's sort of the idea of the police are the thin blue line against all anarchy breaking loose in the world. So that's why we call it that and everything. Of course, a flag has been made that is, and it's gotten other extra connotations since that has happened. But the movie, The Thin Blue Line, is an Errol Morris documentary, and it's about a guy who's in prison, and you slowly find out that this guy in prison didn't do it. He's in there for life. He's actually he's on death row for this murder. And there's another interview with another person who seems to have done it. and so the movie is basically going back and forth about the injustice of what is going on in this thing. And it's sort of lucky that the person who seems to have done it was in jail for another crime at the time, and he was able to get interviewed. And this guy famously admits to the crime to Errol Morris, and this movie changed everything for this guy who was innocent the whole time. And the funny thing is, the guy that's innocent seems to just kind of like take it in stride the entire time and everything. And this was famously made fun of in Documentary Now, the Eye Doesn't Lie. Fred Armisen playing the innocent person and Bill Hader playing the guilty person. And that's another like recommend on top of this. If you watch The Thin Blue Line, watch the Documentary Now making fun of this. But I think this would be a good one because it does have the same kind of dynamics in play in this, even though this is a way more serious one. The movie was taken to task for doing reenactments back in the day. You didn't have actual footage of really anything except the interviews, but they did reenactments, and the reason why this movie wasn't nominated for an Oscar was because of that. I believe it was the Oscars that said you can't give us a movie that has reenactments in it as a documentary. So there you go.
Nice. I haven't seen this. This is on my list of shame. I really should see this. I'm weak in like older documentaries. I need to check some older documentaries off my list, but this is one of them. And I'm very, very interested. So I'll have to check it out.
Yeah, this is a really good one. I think you'll enjoy this tremendously.
Yeah.
Okay. So for next week, we got a couple of things going on here. First off, Jeremy's going to be back. Jeremy's going to be back to the podcast, everyone. So that's going to be exciting. We're going to have a 3-man crew in here again, and so we'll be talking about our next week's homework, which I figured would be fitting because this is a movie that not only I know he loves, I love, and I know you love as well. It's a banger. It's The Untouchables from 1987. We are going to be talking about this one, and so this is a good welcome back type of movie, I believe. This is just an incredible movie that Brian De Palma probably did his most directing he's ever directed in before. So can't wait to talk about that one. That one's going to be a lot of fun. So that's going to be next week. All right. Looks like we have some time for some questions.
Question. I got something to say. I want the truth.
I am listening.
All righty, everyone. What are your favorite movies about fatherhood? I'm taking Star Wars just to get that answer out of the way. This is half in jest. Aaron.
This is an easy one for me. One of my top 5 movies of all time is about fatherhood. It is Finding Nemo. That movie hit me on. It came out when I had 4 boys between the ages of 2 and 7.
Oh my God.
So
I always forget about that when it comes to your kids, that you had this cluster of very young children all in this one. Like, I don't know how you did it, man. I don't know how you did it.
Yeah. Actually, I think 1 in 6. I think it was 2004 when Finding Nemo came out, and actually our youngest was born in 2004, so it was even younger than that. We had a newborn.
2003, maybe.
Maybe it was. But anyways, oh well, there you go. Then yeah, between 1 and 6, and just as a father of young children, trying to figure out how to protect them, how not to be overprotective, like. As your kids grow up, it just hit me on all the levels. Plus, it's Pixar, so they know exactly how to tell a story to full effectiveness. Plus it's a perfect movie. So yeah, Finding Nemo is easy choice. I do want to shout out more recently, Beautiful Boy with Steve Carell and Timothée Chalamet as a even deeper, more traumatic version of those issues and themes, and it's so well done. Great performances by both of them. Another great movie about fatherhood. So I
still haven't seen that. I meant to when it came out, and it's one of those that kind of slipped by. The one that I have on here is Mr. Holland's Opus. Have you ever seen that?
Oh yes.
Mr. Holland's Opus. Richard Dreyfuss plays a music teacher who they go through the decades of him teaching music and everything, and he and his wife have a son who's deaf, and so like he kind of is disappointed in the fact that he has a deaf son throughout this whole thing, and he seems to like his students more because they have the appreciation of music and everything like that, and he doesn't feel like his son who can't hear the music can have an appreciation of music all the way through. And it's not until I believe it's John Lennon's death happens in the movie where he says, oh, he doesn't know how important John Lennon was, and then his son tells him, tells him through sign language, what do you mean that I don't know what this means? John Lennon means as much to me as he does you, whatever, all this other type of stuff. And so it's him learning how to be a father all the way through this thing, and eventually he gets to the point where he makes a song called, I believe, Beautiful Boy or whatever by the end of it. And it's such a touching moment because for the whole movie he's frustrated with the fact that his son can't hear the music and everything. And so like the whole movie he's trying to learn how do I how do I relate to my son this entire time, that something that is obviously not his fault and everything. So like I always appreciated that part of Mr. Holland's opus. So
Yeah, good choice.
Let's do one more here. Have you ever been watching, watching some movie, I think, or a TV show, and a guest actor comes on and just elevates everything? They mention Only Murders in the Building, season 3, Meryl Streep, enough said.
That's a great choice. Meryl Streep does elevate that show, and she's great on it. I went with John Hamm in 30 Rock. Every time John Hamm showed up on 30 Rock,
Yeah.
the show just went to another level. He was perfect for that part and in that show. So I miss 30 Rock sometimes. That was just so sharp. That show was
a great
so
show.
sharp.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, that's my choice.
You know what? The Bear is already good, but the 2 times I've seen Jamie Lee Curtis on The Bear, I feel like it's been elevated to a different level each time. Like it's like wow, this show is so good. How could it possibly get better? Oh, I know. Just insert a drunk Jamie Lee Curtis. That's how you do it. And in both episodes, one which is like a manic anxiety inducing Thanksgiving dinner thing that happens in the second season. That is a great one. And then the one where she visits her daughter in the hospital while she's giving birth to her grandchild. That's another great one. So I feel like the Jamie Lee Curtis, there's probably a million answers for this, by the way, but this is a sort of a recency bias on my part, but Jamie Lee Curtis definitely makes The Bear better when she's on it.
There's a million answers just from The Bear.
Yeah, exactly.
So many people show up in that episode.
That's the absolute truth. Let's see. Going through the chat, let's see. What do we have here? Paulie says There Will Be Blood is an interesting take on fatherhood. I would say that is a good answer there, because that is Daniel Plainview is a very complex character, who you can tell that he loves the boy, but like as soon as the boy becomes competition, it's a different thing. Slab says 8th Grade is a good one. Big Fish is a great, but yeah, 8th Grade, yeah, that's another good one. Big Fish, yes. Nolan says About Time has some pretty good fatherhood moments. That's the Bill Nye character in there. Yeah, really good stuff. And then on the cameo or the guest appearance, I think Shaggy Nuts is talking about the fatherhood one on this. Easy A, I think that's the J.K. Simmons character in that one. I think is it J.K. Simmons? It's J.K. Simmons, right?
No, it's Stanley Tucci.
Stanley Tucci. That's J.K. Simmons is a father in that. What's that? Andy Sam. Well, he's also in Juno too. But then Nolan says in the TV show Elementary, there's an episode with David Harbour as the killer. That's one of the best in the series. I've never seen Elementary. Heard that was good though. Tatsu says Jeffrey Dean Morgan, The Boys. Let's see. Jamie Lee Curtis is mentioned again. We have Josh saying every time Paul Scheer shows up as Billups on Lower Decks, it automatically makes it more funny. Steve Martin in 30 Rock was always one of my favorites. I miscounted the men, Liz. Kastrov says Dolly Parton as herself on the Orville. A lot of these shows I still need to get around to. TV, I'm so lacking on TV these days.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's going to do it for this week. Next week, Jeremy back, Untouchables. I can't wait to talk about that. Chat, once again, thank you for coming out and bringing it during our show. So yeah, we'll see you next time. See ya.
Bye, guys.
Bye. Be a a part of the live show by being a member of the Sin Club at Patreon at patreon.com/cinemasins. Chat with us on the Cinemasins Discord at discord.gg/cinemasins or Cinemasins Twitter at Cinemasins, and email any comments or questions to Recotopia at cinemasins.com. That's RECOTOPIA at cinemasins.com. I just want to say that Fistful only has one L in it, just so that you know. And I'm doing this to save the podcast.
Well, let me edit that then. Yeah, it's a conversation us word nerds get in all the time. Is like, we get frustrated that literally means figuratively now, and it's like, yeah, but it does. Like, ship sailed, like, there's nothing you can do about it. Or what's the one that people take to mean not moved by, but actually means kind of like surprised.
Oh, nonplussed,
right?
Yeah,
it now means both in the dictionary.
Yeah. Right.
And it's like the dictionary has several examples of words now in the dictionary with two completely opposite meanings that are both in the dictionary. And that's just language. Yeah. It's just language.
Well, and the one that always gets me is it's according to the style, I believe, you're supposed to say, I'm going to go lie down. I'm going to go lie down. But I swear to God, most people on this earth say lay down when they go to bed or whatever. And so I'm always like, laying is like when you're laying brick and when you're laying all these other type of stuff. But the problem with lie and lay is that there's a different form of lie when you're talking about lying down that you still use lay for. And it's like, if you're going to make a rule that it's lie down, then don't allow lay to enter the conversation.
Who let lay in the building? Yeah, it's funny. It's hard to get too worked up about that stuff, and yet my instinct is to get too worked up about it. Like, I don't know what that is inside me that's like, I want to. I think it's because I love words so much. Like, as these beautiful little tools that mean something specific. And so when what I've always used a tool for, the rest of the world goes, no, I'm sorry, that flathead you were using is now actually a Phillips. And it's like, well, but what? Like, now my toolbox isn't right. And so it's like, at the end of the day, if you understand what people are talking about, they're communicating well. And if you don't, they're
well, it's
not.
like when you say, I'm feeling good, when it's supposed to be feeling well.
Yeah.
Everybody knows what you mean by feeling good. And there's no reason to be upset about that if somebody says, I'm good or I'm feeling good.
Yeah. James Brown sailed that ship a long time ago. So
That's right.
we're all on board with that one. Are you a word nerd? Like, are you kind of like that, where it's like words mean something? Let's keep them that way.
Yeah, I get kind of upset at it. I just gave you an example.
Yeah, that's true. It's true.
That one bothers me but the problem is, I have words still out there that I know that I use incorrectly because. I sometimes will be writing something on a Sins script, and I'll be like, I want to use this word, and then I go to check to make sure that it's the right word, and it's always wrong. It's always wrong. Like, every time I'm like, oh, this would be a very, there would be a bon mot to use here on this here Sins script. It's like, it turns out that this word actually means. Like I'll sit there and I'll go like, I want to say something like a word like bluster, which, a lot of times I take to mean one thing, but it's like got a very specific meaning. Like, what is it? Bluster. Talk in a loud, aggressive, and indignant way with little effect. And I think I've wanted to use bluster as just as a word salad or, or boasting or something like that. and then you go and look it up, and it's like, oh yeah, bluster means this very specific thing. It doesn't mean that thing. But there's so many of those type of words that I know that I use incorrectly, and it's only because I have, in one specific instance, learned that this is the way to use the word. Not everybody else has. And so, like, there's no reason for me to get upset about it because I do the same things with other words, but there's just I still do because there's things like I learned this. Why doesn't everybody else learn this? That type of thing.
I was listening to a podcast today, and they were talking about Joker 2, which I just saw for the first time yesterday.
Oh yeah,
and they said the movie was completely bereft, and I thought, of what? Like, yeah, you have to finish that. Like, bereft isn't just a straight adjective. Like, bereft of something,
right?
But in his mind, that just meant empty. It meant the same thing as empty. The movie's empty,
right.
Kind of thing.
Right.
And I knew what he meant. But just because I knew what he meant doesn't mean I didn't spend the next 5 minutes in my brain correcting him. You know what I mean? Like, it's this weird, stupid human thing. I think it can go both ways. I think you can hold both things in your heart consistently, which is that it's okay for people to communicate in the way that is most comfortable for them, that gets the point across. And it's also okay to use words as you know to use them in a way that you feel communicates more precisely or better. Both those things can be true. You don't have to. Somebody who has quote unquote studied or whatever is more into words, it doesn't make them a better person, but they also don't have to dumb down their language, in order to be understood. And dumb down is a phrase that has connotation to it, and that's not what I mean.
Yeah.
But the idea is, I think both things can be true. I think there can be grace for just communicating however you want to communicate. So
there's another one out there that bothers me, but it's only because it's one of those. This also happens with human nature too. You learn this type of thing recently, and then you start acting like you knew it all along or whatever.
Yes.
And so, like, I don't know. This has now been a few years ago that I learned that people are using beg the question incorrectly. Beg the question, however, I mean, it's such a perfect phrase for how people use it.
Correct.
So, like, this is one of those weird things where I think the people who invented beg the question, which is a circular argument fallacy.
It's a logical
basically.
fallacy. Yeah.
And so, like, the people who invented the term for that are incorrect in naming it that.
Yeah.
Why would you call this beg the question when you're talking about a circular argument or whatever? Why would you do that? And of course, now everybody in the world has taken beg the question to mean this raises the question. And of course, I still, on scripts, if somebody sends me something that says begs the question, I will change it to raises the question or brings up the question on the script. But yeah, it's one of those things where I feel like the original term, you named that incorrectly. That was stupid on your part to name it beg the question.
Honestly,
there's probably a good logical reason for it.
Probably, but honestly, nonplussed feels the same to me. The way people say that is the way that word sounds,
Yeah, right.
Nonplussed means you are not additive. You are not like and so like, yeah, that just feels like an incorrectly labeled word. But then you have the fact that flammable and inflammable mean the exact same thing.
Yeah, exactly. The Dr. Nick. Inflammable means flammable. I remember a classic moment of using the word nonplussed in a script that you brought up. And I can't remember which movie it was, but I remember you defining it, and I said, but doesn't that still work?
Yeah, it can.
Like, even as it's defined, can't I just use it that way too?
That is the tricky part, because it also doesn't mean like it doesn't mean very interested. It just means surprised, like huh. And that's so it's like it's somewhere in the in between technically.
Yeah.
Words.
Exactly.
Let's just stop using them. Let's just communicate telepathically, and
I mean,
it'll be good.
you know that in like 150 years or something, we're gonna all be going because all these words will just we took too much time to say words. Now we're just doing sounds.